All right. Dirty emojis, Nvidia 0 days, Shlayer, Cozy Bear, Emotet, Babuk, iOS 14.5, all this and more, and Jason Wood on Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. Cybercriminals are working overtime. They're leveraging activity around the COVID vaccine to disguise phishing attacks, hoping to steal money or personal information from your employees or customers. The Barracuda Email Threat Scanner is a free tool you can use right now to help protect your business and ultimately your reputation. The Barracuda Email Threat Scanner analyzes your Office 365 accounts and identifies malicious emails that slip past your gateway and into inboxes. Find the cybersecurity threats hiding in your Office 365 email. Use the Barracuda Email Threat Scanner for free right now at securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
It's the last week of April for this continuation of the pandemic. So let's see what's happening in the news. Well, you want one and you can't get one. Or maybe you don't actually want one. No, you do want one. I know you do. I really do. In fact, get me one if you find some, because Nvidia announced that there is a whole group of security vulnerabilities in their GPU driver. None of them were like horrendous. So 7.5 was the worst thing that came up and it was on the driver installer. But that particular driver installer would allow you to replace an application resource with a malicious file if somebody had local access. So none of these CVEs went too high because they all required local access. But when you start thinking about video cards, every machine's got one. And if you're putting video cards across your organization, it kind of becomes a problem. So obviously, if they can put malware into this resource, they can get to worse things, but it is still local. Other issues in this series, which all required local access, were less severe, but mostly revolved around kernel issues. So there was a lot of other ways that people could escalate and so forth. But again, they were localized, which makes me a little less concerned about it. But they did also then notify that there were 8 vulnerabilities in their vGPU software. So that's the supporting software that's going on the machine. And they were, again, mostly in the 7 severity range. And a lot of them involved things like input data validation errors and more kernel errors and things like that. There are patches for all these, but as ever, you will need to actually put them in place. Shlayer, if you aren't familiar with Shlayer, that's Mac malware that it's been around for a while. But it's now running. It's an active adware dropper, so it uses a 0 day in macOS, which allows it to get around anti-malware. So basically, it means that files can get through. Apple patched it in 11.3 of macOS on Monday, so this is the first patch that came out for that. Shlayer's been around for doing this, and basically what it does, it was all the way since January. This has been going on. It's a vulnerability that is now being used by them to drop other malware onto the Mac. So you can drop these adware type stuff or other malware, because you can drop whatever you want. The vulnerability is based around what I would presume to be in the coding a performance approach to file hashing. Basically, Apple uses what's called notarization, which is a way to scan and approve everything that's going to be allowed to run. So Apple's always prided themselves on being very strict. And so they scan everything that's going to be allowed to run. And they do this by examining bundles of files. That's the part I was thinking probably is a performance-related issue, because, scanning each individual thing. So you scan the whole bundle at once to see if it matches a hash, and instead of looking at every individual file. But basically what happens then is that notarization process has a property list that shows where all the files are located. And that property list, which is called .plist, has all this information contained in it. Well, apparently there's a little problem with that. If there is no plist, so if that is missing, the file is considered that it's not a bundle and can execute. So like a fail open problem. And, so there's no notification or alerts or anything. And so, oops, there it goes, and something can be run. It is patched, so you know what to do there. Another new attack can affect all versions of Windows. Get that? It's a little esoteric, but it does allow attackers to get domain admin privileges without other user interaction, so they don't actually have to talk to the domain admin. Basically, it is called a new technology LAN manager relay attack. And you've probably heard of those kind of attacks before, but it basically takes advantage of a flaw in Windows, which would allow you to hijack the domain admin credentials when you're connected to RPC server. So somebody can log in remotely to RPC server and run this attack. And what they do is they use a DCOM client. And what happens is they send it without a sign flag being set. And the domain admin user logs in somewhere. There's a domain admin user logged in on that server. And then the attacker can basically cause the DCOM service to impersonate the high privilege user that is also logged in, and that basically then it turns into a man-in-the-middle attack and relays their connection to other resources within the domain using that domain admin's privilege. If you want to read about that, the article I put on the wiki has a whole description and a link to the Git repository that's got the proof of concept for that. It is fairly esoteric, but I thought it was pretty interesting kind of attack. So if you want to check that out, feel free. The FBI, the DHS, and CISA all announced on Monday that APT-29, or Cozy Bear, which is an alleged component of a Russian foreign intelligence service that we are all familiar with, we've all heard about Cozy Bear over and over and over again, are continuing attacks against U.S. and foreign organizations, which I thought the phrasing on that was kind of funny because it basically, they say the U.S. and foreign organizations. So I was like, I guess what you mean to say there is all organizations. So are there any other, or that like alien organizations are excluded from this or whatever? But the U.S. and foreign organizations are being targeted by this. According to CISA, Cozy Bear is continuing to seek intelligence from organizations worldwide with stealthy intrusion tradecraft, which I took to be a fancy government way of saying, like, phishing, or just calling people and going, hey, we need to log into your system. But they're taking advantage of a previously compromised network. They listed password spraying, zero-day exploits, well-mess malware, which is another type of ransomware family, and SolarWinds, which obviously is a biggie in this. And SolarWinds was probably being the most dramatic, although a lot of those others work quite well. The U.S. government has been taking increased actions against Russia in the last several weeks, including an executive order from the President of the United States and sanctions being applied to multiple Russian technology firms. So a lot of this is stemmed out of the 2016 election and all that kind of stuff, and then additional attempts, I guess, by some Russian entities to mess with the election in 2020, and just generally they've been messing around a lot. So Cozy Bear, pretty well famous. Could it be the end of Emotet? I doubt it, but it's a start. So Emotet is a massive, I know everybody knows this, but sometimes we have listeners that don't know all these things. Emotet is a massive botnet that has been around for years and years, and it started off as a fairly simplistic tool. It has evolved, and it has become a very sophisticated framework that can be used for the delivery of just about any kind of malware, and has one of the largest botnets in history that has been running. And it all starts with email. So this is an email phishing type botnet where they send you the email, you click the link, and the next thing you know, you're part of the botnet and you're being used to distribute malware and so forth. But lately, international efforts by law enforcement have been targeting the botnet, and basically they started doing server takedowns and domain takedowns and all kinds of stuff, trying to disrupt the operation of it, because botnets are very difficult to stop because they're distributed by nature. And so since they're often running on people's machines that don't know about it and so forth, it's really difficult to isolate and say this is what's causing it. But by targeting the main servers and domains, they have been able to do that. Germany's federal police then pushed, this is how they did it. They pushed new configurations to active Emotet networks in the form of a DLL, and they pushed that into the infected systems, which basically uninstalled the malware. So they hacked the hack. And which and this was on the 25th of April. So this is the second time I saw that kind of thing being done. We saw some of that being done previously with other botnets, but this was the second example in the last 2 weeks of government law enforcement hacking back. And this was something that if you ask any government official about, even a year ago, because I've done it, they said absolutely not. There's no hacking back is never going to happen. It's not going to be done. But this was another case. This time, the German federal police hacking back. 2 weeks ago, the FBI basically attacked government servers that were still running proxy logon and had not been patched. And of course, got in through the proxy logon web shell and then basically shut the web shell down, which was pretty cool. So I don't know where this goes, but it's definitely a thing. And so now we're seeing the German federal police do it. We just saw the FBI do it. So we don't know where, this is going to go next. So, how far will they extend all these things? Now, all this was legal, mind you. So they all had warrants and all these kind of things. So it wasn't that they were doing something wrong. It was just an ethics discussion. On the same lines, though, the D.C. Metro Police were apparently attacked by the Babuk ransomware gang who were leaking screenshots of data. So they had all these screenshots of folders and things that were exfiltrated from the Metropolitan Police Department, which is the primary police agency for Washington, D.C. Metro Police said they were aware of a breach and that they had contacted the FBI. Babuk claimed they had stolen about 250 gigabytes of unencrypted files and had them available, and they were providing, this sort of proof of life idea on their website. But they basically said that the Metropolitan Police Department had 3 days to contact them, or they will start releasing the names of police informants and specifically information related to the 6th January attack on the U.S. Capitol. All this is sort of back in that kidnapping kind of thing. We'll send you Bunny Lebowski's little toe if you don't cough up the cash, that kind of stuff. Yeah. If you don't get Big Lebowski references, I'm sorry. You should get Big Lebowski references. Apple decided to take on Facebook this week with iOS 14.5 and others. Apple basically promised that this is going to actually contain what they've been calling the application tracking transparency feature, which is going to allow you as a user to allow or deny applications which are trying to track your activities for marketing purposes or whatever purposes. Facebook didn't like this much, and Zuck called Apple a bunch of poopy heads or something like that. I mean, I guess Facebook didn't like this. A lot of other sites didn't like this idea. And, of course, this will trigger new rounds of what I call service denial attacks. So I call a service denial attack is where an application that you want to use, like where is the nearest Denny's? And the app says, enable tracking, and then you're sort of like, well, either I don't go to Denny's and get the Grand Slam breakfast at 4 o'clock in the morning, or I have to deny this app, and I have to allow it to track my stuff. So my guess is this won't do very much. That even though Apple has added the feature, basically either you're going to give these apps the ability to do it anyway, but then at least Apple's off the hook, right? So nobody can turn around and say this was because of Apple. So the app developers will all, of course, deny that they're tracking you anyway, and say, oh, no, we don't ever use that data inappropriately or sell it. No, of course not. And then they'll all go testify in front of Congress that they're just poor victims of communist propaganda to take over the free world, and they'll deny us all access to our meat-based beer products. And if you didn't see that story, I'm sorry, because that was pretty ridiculous. But in the end, well, they'll still going to track you, and they're still going to sell your data. And we'll just have to make even longer user service agreements that you won't read before clicking yes so you can play Candy Crush. Sorry, was that a rant? I guess that was a rant, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, when we return, the amazing Jason Wood is with us, so hang around.
As technology continues to evolve and expand, so have the attackers that put our critical systems in jeopardy. Core Impact from Core Security is a penetration testing tool that safely finds vulnerabilities using the same techniques of adversaries, with certified exploits and wizards that guide you through critical pen tests while maximizing the time of advanced testers by automating their routines. With Core Security, you can safeguard your infrastructure by limiting access, detecting threats, testing for security weaknesses, and efficiently monitoring data. Visit securityweekly.com/core security.
Well, he's most famous for creating genetic chimeras that still roam the deserts to this day. His bacon-flavored horny toads and cuddly scorpions made him the envy of every unethical geneticist from Taos to Boise. Dr. Moreau himself once called him the shining light of the future of the genetically modified freak community. And until one day it all went wrong and he turned to cybersecurity, turning his back on the secret underground desert labs filled with pig bats and cat snakes. Hi, Jason.
Hey, you know you love those bacon-flavored horny toasts.
Oh, I tell you, I buy them by the gross.
Don't tell me you don't.
I get them by the gross from Costco. I mean, it's like
crowning achievement right there.
I'm telling you. I mean, who could say no to that? it's like everything in one small chewable package.
That's exactly it. Just don't look real hard at the.
I mean, I don't. Who reads the ingredient list anyway? I mean, you read
there
that.
You go.
You just regret it, and you're still eating it. You just regret it more.
There you go. And you don't know what it said anyway. So, so let's switch over to maybe just that cybersecurity thing that Doug was talking about that we were into. I ran into this article on Portswigger's blog discussing a report released by a vendor named Adversa AI on a component of machine learning and artificial intelligence that's being neglected. Now, what is that component? Well, we're on a security podcast, so you might guess that they're neglecting security. Not really a big surprise there, I suppose. Seems to be the pattern that we have with new technology systems. So I dug into this partly because I don't know much about AI systems. I've started to learn a little bit about it, and this report caught my eye. So one of the things the Portswigger article dives right into is that, hey, we're getting AI systems deployed all over the place for various types of functionality. Simple stuff like silly little chatbots that annoy the heck out of us on websites to, much more complex systems where we have machine learning being applied to do some analysis that's difficult or on large data sets for difficult for us humans to do. So it was really kind of interesting to read through this and see some of the things that they're proposing here. I went ahead and I checked out the report as well because they had the link to that, and I was curious what they had to say directly. I know in security we tend to make fun of things like ML and AI and buzzword bingo, particularly when we get into marketing materials. But realistically, I mean, these are technologies that are being deployed and being used. And basically, according to Adversa, we're not really prepared for someone to attempt to attack or manipulate this very well. In fact, as I was reading through the report, they kept talking about, hey, we're making the same mistakes that we did with networks and then endpoints and then web applications, and they're drawing some correlations there. Basically, what it boiled down to is they're trying to get the stupid things to work, be reliable, and fulfill whatever that they want them to do. And nobody's spending a ton of time on looking at the security aspect of it. How could this thing be manipulated? How could somebody attack this? What are the things we need to be concerned with here? It makes it even more difficult because not very many people understand what's going on when we have things like an ML system being run. How is it acting on this data? What is it doing? How is it going to react to data that's being put into it? And could somebody taint that and cause it to produce outputs that we don't expect? Instead, it gets deployed to production. We try and keep it up and running, and then all of a sudden, oh crap, we're getting something going on here because somebody's being clever and manipulating the system in a way that we don't want. According to Adversa, welcome to the current state of AI. So lesson number one from this for me was, hey, look at that. We're making the same mistakes again with a newish technology. Again, one of the problems that we have with the security on this, and that has always kind of stopped me, is just the complexity of it, particularly since I slept through a lot of my math classes, is that they're more complex in how they operate. These systems will take in all kinds of data, be that text or images or audio files or what have you, and then it gets a model applied to it, and then it makes some kind of decision based on that. It is not as straightforward as recognizing, hey, that looks like a SQL injection attack in this request we received on an HTTP or an HTTP request. So how do you try and build defenses against that when a lot of us aren't familiar with it? There's a kind of a high bar to get into to working with this technology as far as what you need to learn and understand. And the software is going ahead and it's making the decisions. It's not as simple as a human looking at it saying it has to match this pattern or bounce it and get rid of this. Instead, the there's a model applied to it. The software is taking the data, applying it to its model, and the model has to somehow inform the software on how to respond, recognize something that is not right, and respond to it in a way that's graceful and doesn't cause an outcome that we don't want. So that was kind of interesting to me, particularly since, when we talk about these types of AI systems, they typically need a lot of data to train, and we don't, if we're developing on something like this, we don't typically have that kind of data maybe that we're interested in laying around. And so, one of the things that the Portswigger post pointed out is that people are going to get repositories on GitHub of this type of data and using that to train their data, their model, and as a result, they're not checking all of that data. So an adversary could put in malicious information into that, and we could train our model or our AI system on bad data. So that was really kind of, it's an interesting issue that we've got to deal with here. Another interesting takeaway was that, hey, we don't have a lot of security research in this area that's published on the topic. They go back to 2010 or something like that. Anyhow, they said in 2015 we had 20 papers being published by academia. By 2018, we were up to 617. Well, 2019, 2020, we were 1,000 and 1,500-ish, roughly. This is an area that's ripe for security research. If you're interested in this sort of thing, you're looking for an opportunity or an area that hasn't already been poured over quite a bit, this is something to take a look at. Again, just a word of warning, as I've poked at this a little bit, I found that, hey, look, I need to brush up on a lot of my math. So I've been spending time on Khan Academy, for example, to relearn some algebra and calculus that I've forgotten over the years. But it is an area that it has opportunities for us in security to expand and to grow. So that's something to take a look at if this is something interesting to you. And again, I guess one of the main lesson here is we're heading down the same path we've done before with other technologies. We're trying to get it out, we're trying to get it working, and then later on we'll figure out how to protect it. And we've seen how well that works. So I expect we're going to see more interesting news topics about the system being abused and attacked in some way, and see that hit the news. So that's something to keep an eye out for. Should be fun and interesting to see how it goes. The Portswigger blog post will be in the show notes. The link to the Adversa report I didn't put in the show notes because it requires registration to get access to it. However, I did notice that it happily accepts things like Gmail addresses and anything you want for a company. You can pretty much provide anything you want there to get access to the report. So with that, happy reading and enjoy.
Well, thank you, Jason. I certainly agree. The infamous or famous Dr. Lou Glorfeld, who was one of my mentors, he was heavily involved in this stuff back in the late 90s and doing a lot of the big data stuff. And I remember talking with him about data pollution, about people intentionally trying to inject data that could sway algorithms and things like that. Because we were looking at retail stuff, but it's a very cool field. And as it moves into security, I think it's going to be, like you said, a very big area that people could get into. But it is a little, up there. So
yeah, I had to have to work.
I had to have Lou explain a lot of it to me because, he could do Fourier transformations in his head, and I can't quite do that. So it was, but cool topic. So check it out. And finally, now I am old, so I don't get emojis, so I'm all the time screwing up and sending people, purple monkeys, which apparently means some kind of dramatically perverse act. But Apple has revised emojis again to try and make them more friendly, I guess. The blood-dripping syringe, which is one of my favorite emojis, which probably means something really dirty. Like, I don't know what it means. It just looks cool, but it probably means something really dirty. Like, what's the dirtiest thing you can think of right now? Like eggplant parmesan. I don't know what that means, but if you look that up on Urban Dictionary, don't look that up on Urban Dictionary. I mean, I can't even imagine how disgusting whatever eggplant parmesan means in Urban Dictionary. But anyway, I digress. They released a new syringe which contains a soothing blue liquid, which looked a lot like meth. But I was like, that kind of looks, and I don't know much about meth except I watched Breaking Bad a couple of times. So, but it could also be Clorox. Well, I think that's sort of a greenish color. But I don't know what the liquid's supposed to be. I don't know what you're supposedly doing with it in this nice syringe. And I damn sure don't know what it will soon mean when you use it with a strawberry and a purple monkey. But, these kids today and their emojis, I mean, in my day, we just painted ourselves blue and ran through the park naked or something like that. But anyway, that's the news. Thanks, Jason. I'm Doug White. I'm trying to learn emojis, but I just sent a banana and 2 strawberries and a crying winky face to my boss, so I'm probably fired. Or maybe I won a Nobel Prize. I'm not sure. See you Friday on Security Weekly News.